Justin, we've both looked at the Final Fantasy 15 trailer, and I gotta say, I'm actually kind of excited about Final Fantasy 15.
And part of it is that it looks really good. Like, I wasn't prepared for watching it, and I'm watching it, I'm like, oh, it's gonna be a whole bunch of cutscenes. And you're like, there's a point where you realize that what you're watching is gameplay. And that just kind of took me aback a little bit. And then I had to rewatch it and go, so like, what parts of this can I tell are almost definitely gameplay and which parts aren't? And I really can't tell the difference.
Yeah, it sounds like at this stage they've reached the point where probably everything's in the same engine, and we don't have to really worry about what's taking place in one place or another because it's just all going to be essentially the same storytelling, gameplay together in one sort of presentation, which is not necessarily new. That's one of the things I love about, say, Metal Gear Solid 4, but you know, seeing it here seems very impressive.
Yeah, having a game that's obviously built for the ground up, well, maybe not for the ground up, for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, but didn't this start like 20 years ago?
About 20 years ago.
This was originally for the PS1.
I don't think we're going back that far, but it was one of the original Final Fantasy 13 games that were announced, along with Agito and the original Final Fantasy 13. This was Final Fantasy Versus 13. You know, it looks good. I like the road trip vibe. A lot of people, you know, kind of looking at hey, we're crossing the country in a convertible.
And the K-pop band vibe of like 4 super handsome dudes with awesomely coiffed hair, just like bopping around in their car, belt buckles everywhere.
Yeah, and they're all
leather.
Super slick and smooth. Oh, nothing bothers me about all this crazy stuff happening around me.
It's the combat that is what people are really talking about from this trailer, though. It's what does that mean? What kind of game is this going to be?
What is it exactly? And I wish I had a good handle on exactly what it plays like, because we don't really see anything in terms of interface except for the party health bars. And so it's not really clear. You surmised earlier that there might be a Final Fantasy 12 sort of system where you can program the AI to do things while you control one character.
And one thing that's probably going to piss some people off is this obviously is not turn-based. I mean, even though we're going to the core Final Fantasy 15 numbering, this is obviously action-adventure combat. This is going to be, it looks very similar to Kingdom Hearts. I mean, you see the numbers when you hit the guys, so you're doing damage that's RPG-based, but it seems to be happening in real time. I'm going to guess that you don't just like say, hey, fight, and then watch your character do it.
My favorite moment in the entire trailer is them driving by and this giant beast or whatever behind them, and they say, that's its face! Which is both funny to me because it doesn't strike me as though, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what the writing is like in Final Fantasy 15. But it really is a great moment where you get an idea of just how massive some of these beasts are, and then at one point they actually look like they're taking a break. They're pulling over, you know, at waterside, and you see what looks like giant brontosauruses in the background. And I'm kind of curious about this world, which it's the real world, right? It's a fantasy version of the real world.
A fantasy that has cars that have some kind of engine sound. It's obviously not electric because it has a really big engine that's coming through it.
The one thing that worries me is, as we shut this conversation down, though, is so it's now real world, and just shut this off now if you're worried about spoilers for the Final Fantasy 13 series, which ended with Lightning Returns.
Also,
so turn it off now.
You're also saying real world with massive brontosauruses and a pillar of energy thing. So,
but it's not, you know, for example, like another place, another planet, another, like a completely made up. It does seem to be like a fantasy version of our own world, and so
where everyone is super handsome.
Well, of course, like you and I. But it's interesting to know that Lightning Returns ends in essentially the real world. And so I kind of wonder about any potential connections that Square is trying to make, or whether that's meant to be more of a just more of a thematic transition.
Because Final Fantasy generally is not a connected world. Each, especially when you get into the numbered ones, they become very distinct. But since this was based on that original Fabulo Crystallis Novel, whatever thing, that might be a good theory.
No, but I'm hoping not. I'm hoping that they just split it off, and no, who knows? I mean, that is its face. they tell us right there, that's its face. I wouldn't have known if they had noticed that.